Hi, my name is AD Hughes, and today I'm going to talk to you about one of the most common mistakes that people make when they're strumming chords. If you're new to my channel, please go ahead and hit the subscribe button. I've been teaching guitar for over 10 years, so this series of videos is all about talking about the things, or rather the mistakes that I see people commonly make that are quite easy to avoid. Now today's discussion is regarding strumming chords and the accuracy you need when strumming certain strings. And quite simply, often beginners kind of strum too much, try and do too much work with the strumming. It really is a case of less is more when it comes to strumming chords. So let me demonstrate. Let's say you had a nice big G major chord. It's a 6-string chord, so there's a note on every single string. So that would make you think that you might need to strum every single string. However, you don't. You don't require to do that. There's a few reasons why you don't need to do it, but mostly it muddies up the sound. It lacks clarity when you do so. So if I was to strum that as part of a strumming pattern, you get this kind of sound. Now that's not very nice to listen to. Whereas if we were to strum certain strings, you get this type of sound. It sounds a lot more delicate, a lot cleaner, and you know, if I was going to sing at the top of it, which I certainly wouldn't because I can't sing, it wouldn't get in the way, it wouldn't sound very messy at all. And more importantly, if we got other people in the band, we wouldn't be encroaching on their soundscape. So usually with a guitar, we're only meant to sort of fill certain elements of the sound, because the bass notes, generally speaking, they're going to be played by the bass player or keyboard player. So we don't really need to mess them up. So the way we avoid sort of hitting those soundscapes and having that whole muddy sound come across in our chords is by working on strumming just the last few strings of each chord. So that might sound counterintuitive because there's 6 notes in this, or 6 strings, should I say, in this chord, but we don't have to strum them all to make a good sound. So if I was just to strum those last few strings again, listen to how nice it sounds. I don't need to be strumming those bass notes. I do not need to strum, you know, this big thick E string and A string at the top for this G chord to sound like a G chord. Your ears automatically fill in the gaps and make the sound of the bass notes there. So I don't really need to force that sound in. It's also worth noting that although I'm not necessarily strumming those thicker strings there, they're still ringing out. It's only slightly, but they are ringing out. You'll notice this more in an electric guitar or in a high volume situation. When you make any kind of sound on your instrument, it makes all the other strings vibrate. So in this instance where I'm strumming just these couple of thinner strings, my thick strings at the top, which probably won't come through on this recording, they're still ringing out. Okay, there's a slight hum I can hear in the room here. And that's because the vibrations of the other strings, the vibrations of the guitar and any kind of standing vibrations in the room are making these unmuted strings at the top that I'm holding down ring out. So whilst I might not actually be physically hitting these strings, they're still creating the notes that I'm holding down here. And that's why it's kind of important to always hold down the chord when you're playing stuff. I see a lot of people not play the first couple of notes sometimes. This is quite common with children because they can't fit their hands all the way around the neck. We can't really avoid it in certain cases with that. But quite often people will see a G chord and think, well, it's just the last 2 strings. Why do I need to hold down the whole lot? Well, these strings will ring out on the top, even if you're not strumming them. So at least if you're holding down, they're going to ring out the correct notes. Now, this isn't to say that you can't play the thicker strings. You know, if you're doing a finger picking pattern, then you might want to hang it down. But it's a lot more delicate in that nature. It's not really clouding out very much. When you're strumming it, it's a very powerful sound. And hitting those thick strings on the top, they really just cloud out everything else that's happening. You don't really get a good clear sound. And again, that doesn't work in the mix of a band, and even solo, it doesn't really work very well. Now, that's not to say that if you want to create that heavy sound on the top that you can't. So if you were playing heavy rock, then it would all be concentrated on those those bassy notes because that's the particular sound that you like. And you will occasionally get people playing slash chords and things, or just hanging the odd note over the rest of the song. But generally speaking, it's best avoiding them from a default position. Just try and work on those thinner strings. If ever you get into recording and you start recording your music, you will notice this even more so. It's very apparent in the recording process how much hitting these thicker strings can spoil a mix. So it's a really good idea to try and avoid them unless you really want to force that particular sound into your playing. And that doesn't matter whether you're playing the big open chords or even playing the more sort of howled voices up the neck. You still really don't want to be pushing too much of that bass note coming out the top. Let's leave that to the bass players and the keyboard players, and give our singers a bit more room to sing and hear their voice. I will stop that there. A very simple lesson there, a very, very easy thing to fix if you're not getting clarity in your playing. That's a good place to look at the start. So really just make sure that you're strumming those thinner strings, concentrating on them. Make sure that if you are playing a big chord that you are still holding down the other notes. And with certain chords which don't involve the first couple of strings or the thickest couple of strings, make sure you are muting so you don't get any unwanted string noise from notes that aren't going to be in key with your chord. If you enjoyed this or have any comments of your own, please leave them below. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and I shall see you soon. Thank you very much for watching and listening.